Years later, when we were debriefed by the intelligence folks, they say, okay, now, Red Carey. And let me tell you, I said, oh, no, please. That's Fred. No, there's a name. We have Fred. There's another name, Red Carey. Well, going through that, he finally said, hey, you guys handle it. I'm going home, type of thing. So, living in this kind of an environment, several things that we recognize. One is, living in these cells that were minimal, 24 hours a day. They let you out 10 minutes a day outside to throw some water over you from the cistern and wash your clothes out a little bit, rinse them out. Being locked up, the food, they feed us twice a day for many, many years. Substandard, you might say. Amazingly, it kept us alive. In the summers, they gave us pumpkin soup. Once in a while, a little sliver of pumpkin and rice. In the winter, this green vegetable and rice. Then one day we figured out where this green vegetable came from. Outside one of the camps, they used to have these ponds. And at night they would have us take our waste bucket, go out and dump it in the ponds. And after a while, you can see this little green algae grow. It starts to get bigger and bigger and big, leafy. Pretty soon the whole place is covered, all the pond's covered by this big leafy stuff. And then one day I was looking out there, and here in short, the guards and the cooks would go out there and they'd scoop up all these big leaves, bring them in, chop them up, throw them in, boil them, and then feed it to us with rice. That's what we call sewer greens. But I'll tell you something, there must have been something in there because it kept us healthy. We lost a lot of weight. I mean, we weren't the model Atlas model guys, I mean, you go like this and all your bones are sticking out and what have you, but the bottom line is it really kept us alive. It kept us healthy in general. Because in those days, there was no medication. I mean, you got sick, you really got sick, it was too bad. Then, of course, after that, on top of that was the pressure. Some people, we call it torture, for propaganda purposes mostly. But, that's something you just had to live with. And in my book, I have a few sketches in there from a fellow who was a good artist that depicts pretty well a lot of what I'm talking about. But the organization by 1969 had developed to a point where we had our senior ranking officers and what have you. In 1970, there was a Sante raid in the fall of 1970. Now bear in mind that in 68 the bombing stopped. The peace talks started in Paris, and things got sort of quiet. What I mean is that there were no more POWs coming in. Therefore, we weren't getting any more news of what was happening. So you really had to filter out stuff from the propaganda. When the Sante raid happened in the fall of 1970, the reaction was to shut down all the camps and bring everybody into the Hanoi Hilton, but a big section which we called Camp Unity. And it was a time that we had the opportunity to formally organize ourselves. I mean, we were all in the same location, allegedly not supposed to communicate with one cell and the other, but give me a break. You don't tell that to, you couldn't tell that to your junior high kids. You got to tell it to us. So we formally formed the 4th Allied POW Wing. I say Allied because we did have with us a couple of allies, a couple of South Vietnamese pilots that were in the camps, and a couple of Laotian pilots. And we even developed a crest. I had a friend of mine who was a good artist, and he developed a crest. And on this crest, we had, let me back up. For those of you who are former veterans, You notice that I said POW wing I didn't say squadron, I didn't say air group, I said wing. Now what that tells you is what service the senior ranking officer was in. Rank has its privilege. Anyway, we had a motto, and our motto, it was return with honor. And what it really encompassed was what we were all about. Our values, our principles. We all knew we were going to come home someday. We didn't know when, but whatever we did day to day as a group, it was to come home with honor. Which is interesting, because as the administration was working all those years to achieve peace with honor, we were working to achieve our return with honor. Key ingredient. Well, in early 72, in the spring of 1972, we're in our area in the compound of, at that time I was back in the zoo. And lo and behold, here comes an air raid again. We hadn't heard these sirens and we hadn't heard all of this in 4 years. And lo and behold, we all, startle us, and we run into our cells and what have you. Because by this time, beginning in '69 time frame, as the peace talks had been going on, the Vietnamese, I think, must have realized that there was going to be an end to this someday, and that we were going to be an important part of it. And so starting in late '69, early 1970, they started to take better care of us. Started to feed us better, started letting us live in little groups and then gradually larger groups. Starting to let us go out, spend time outside of our cells, and gradually became more of what we would traditionally consider a POW environment. So when the bombing started again, we recognized, by this time, we recognized that the only way we were going to come home with our honor was to force the Vietnamese to accept what the administration was trying to achieve. Now, that was exciting because in the summer of '72, things were picking up. The activity around North Vietnam, the bombing was picking up. And then in the fall, it really started to pick up. Now, there was a pause in the 1972 elections about that time, because by that time we were sort of following events through the propaganda, and we started to get new shoot-downs. So we started to learn, get more recent news. And then when Nixon was re-elected, then the bombing really became intense and serious. And it just increased and increased. And we rejoiced because we knew that he was not going to stop again until he achieved his objective, the administration. By December of 1972, it became really dramatic. All day, the fighter bombers would come in, and all night, we could hear the rumble and the roar of B-52s dropping around Hanoi, hitting targets. And every once in a while, the sky would light up when 52 was hit. And we knew there would be people, coming out, bailing out, or whatever they could do. And the next day, here come new people were being brought in by the stretchers and POWs, fresh, still have the uniform, their flight suits on. And so it continued and it continued, and by Christmas of '72, we could tell that the Vietnamese were on the ropes. I mean, when the sirens would go off, the guards would just moan and say, "Oh no," they wouldn't even go man their guns anymore. This is how it was. And then after Christmas, it stopped. And for 10 days or so, there was nothing. And then one day they took us all out in the courtyard. But we were back in the Hanoi Hilton by that time. I was. And they announced that the peace treaty had been signed in Paris. And that we would, we'll let you know. That was beginning of January. I would say that about within a couple of weeks, one night I look out and here's a bunch of people coming in. Middle of the night, they're bringing in a bunch of people. And I looked out there and I started seeing people that I hadn't seen in years. Former cellmates, what have you. And what they had done is they'd taken a lot of the guys in the summer of '72, spring and summer, and moved them to a camp up on the China border. So we basically had two major camps for security purposes as a result of the Son Tay raid. Well, when I looked out and I saw these fellows, and I saw guys like Tom Barrett, who was my very first cellmate in 1965, and then others that I hadn't seen in years, and they came in and they were bringing them in. We knew that was it, and within another week they came in and said, tomorrow you go home, and they gave us shoes, they gave us trousers, they gave us shirts, they gave me a windbreaker, and they said you could take a few of these if you want to go home. And then the next day, they lined